Chapter 1. The Beach House Bash. The beach house was alive with music and laughter, the kind of sound that rolled out onto the sand and mingled with the ocean breeze. Bryce Snider stood near the sliding glass doors, a bottle of beer in hand, watching his friends like a man observing a different species. He wasn't an introvert, he liked people well enough, but he'd never been the guy who thrived in the center of attention. Tonight was no different. The living room was packed with familiar faces and a few strangers, all glowing under the soft amber lights strung across the ceiling. Bryce's best friend, Tyler, was in his element, commanding the room with a grin that could sell bad ideas as brilliant ones. Bryce had seen that grin talk people into karaoke contests, midnight swims, and once a regrettable tattoo. "Bryce," Tyler's voice cut through the music. "You're standing there like a bouncer. Come on, man, join the game." Bryce raised his beer in a lazy salute. "I'm good. Someone's got to make sure you don't burn the place down." Tyler laughed and clapped him on the shoulder. "It's a drinking game, not a bonfire. You'll survive." Bryce gave him a look. "Last time you said that, I woke up wearing a sombrero and holding a goat." "That was college," Tyler said, grinning wider. "And technically, the goat belonged to the neighbor." Bryce shook his head, amused despite himself. Tyler had been trying for years to drag him back into the dating pool, convinced that Bryce's self-imposed exile was a crime against humanity. Bryce didn't see it that way. After a string of dates that ended with him footing the bill and getting ghosted, he decided he was done playing the fool. By 25, he'd retired from the game entirely. 4 years later, he was still retired. He wasn't bitter, at least he told himself he wasn't. He just didn't see the point in chasing something that didn't seem to exist anymore. His parents had raised him to believe in honesty, loyalty, and treating people with respect. Somewhere along the way, those values had started to feel like relics in a world obsessed with swipes and likes. "Bryce!" another voice called. This time it was Jenna, Tyler's girlfriend, waving him over to the kitchen island where a circle of people were gathered. "Truth or drink? You're up." Bryce groaned inwardly but walked over. Saying no to Jenna was like saying no to sunshine, it just wasn't possible. She handed him a shot glass filled with something neon blue. "What is this?" Bryce asked, sniffing it cautiously. "Liquid courage," Jenna said with a wink. "Now, truth or drink?" Bryce eyed the circle. Tyler was smirking like a man who'd already planned Bryce's humiliation. "Truth," Bryce said, because drinking that concoction felt like a health hazard. Jenna grinned. "When was the last time you had a successful date?" The group erupted in laughter. Bryce felt heat creep up his neck but managed a shrug. "Define successful." "Dinner, fun. Maybe a kiss goodnight," Jenna said, tapping her chin. "You know, the usual." Bryce hesitated, then sighed. "High school." The laughter doubled. Tyler nearly fell off his stool. "You're kidding." "Nope." Bryce tossed back the shot anyway, because if he was going to be roasted, he might as well numb the sting. The liquid burned like betrayal. "Man, you're a unicorn," someone said. "How does a guy like you stay single this long?" Bryce smiled faintly. "Talent." The game rolled on, questions growing bolder, drinks flowing faster. Bryce answered a few more truths, dodged a couple with shots, and before long, the room tilted pleasantly. He wasn't drunk. Not yet. But he was definitely on the road. Hours blurred into laughter and music. Someone started a dance-off. Someone else tried to balance a beer bottle on their forehead. Bryce found himself laughing harder than he had in months, the weight of his usual caution slipping away like sand through fingers. When Tyler shoved another drink into his hand, Bryce didn't argue. He drank, and drank again. The last clear memory he had was Jenna declaring him the nicest guy in the zip code, and Tyler crowning him with a plastic tiara. After that, everything dissolved into a warm, spinning haze. The world returned in fragments. Light too bright. A ceiling he didn't recognize. A distant hum of traffic instead of waves. Bryce groaned and rolled over, his head pounding like a drumline. He froze. There was someone in bed beside him. A woman, sleeping. Her hair spilled across the pillow in dark waves. Her breathing slow and even. Bryce's brain short-circuited. What the hell? He sat up too fast and regretted it instantly, clutching his skull. His clothes, where were his clothes? He was wearing boxers and a t-shirt that didn't feel like his. Panic clawed up his throat. "Okay, think. You were at the beach house. There was a party. Drinking game. Tiara. Then nothing. How did you get here? Who is she? Did you?" Bryce squeezed his eyes shut. No, no way. He wasn't that guy. He didn't do random hookups. He didn't even do planned ones. His first instinct was to sneak out, quietly, grab his pants wherever they were, and vanish before she woke up. He swung his legs off the bed, scanning the room for clues. It was a cozy apartment, sunlight streaming through gauzy curtains. A bookshelf lined one wall, filled with novels and framed photos. None of it looked familiar. He spotted his jeans draped over a chair and lunged for them. He had one leg in when a voice, warm and amused, drifted from the bed. "Good morning, Tiger." Bryce froze mid-hop, his heart slamming against his ribs. Slowly, he turned. The woman was awake now, propped on one elbow, smiling like they shared a private joke. Ah! Bryce's vocabulary abandoned him. Morning. She stretched, utterly unbothered, and Bryce caught a glimpse of bare shoulder before yanking his gaze to the ceiling. You look like you're about to bolt, she said, laughter in her voice. Relax. You're safe. Safe? Bryce wasn't sure he'd ever felt less safe in his life.
Sorry. Just.
I don't usually. He trailed off, wishing the floor would open and swallow him. The woman tilted her head, studying him with eyes the color of strong coffee. You really don't remember, do you? Bryce swallowed hard. Not exactly. Her smile widened, and Bryce had the distinct impression she was enjoying this. Well, she said, this is going to be fun. Chapter 2. The morning mystery. Bryce's brain was doing somersaults. Fun? She said this was going to be fun? He wasn't sure what dictionary she was using, but in his, waking up half-dressed in a stranger's apartment ranked somewhere between tax audit and root canal. He managed to get both legs into his jeans, though his hands shook like he'd just downed 6 espressos. Look, sorry about whatever happened. I didn't mean to. The woman laughed softly, cutting him off. You didn't do anything wrong, Bryce. He froze. You know my name? Of course. She sat up, pulling the sheet around her like a casual queen. Tyler talks about you all the time. Bryce blinked. Tyler? His best friend? The guy who thought tequila was a personality trait? Wait, you know Tyler. Her smile turned sly. Better than you do. Bryce's stomach dropped. Who exactly are you? She extended a hand like they were meeting at a coffee shop instead of in bed. Emma. The name hit him like a slow-motion car crash. Emma. Tyler's sister. The one who'd moved away years ago. The one Tyler never stopped bragging about. Smart, ambitious, too busy conquering the corporate world to come home for holidays. Bryce had seen her once, maybe twice, back when she was still in college. She'd been all sharp edges and confidence even then. And now she was here, in town, in bed, with him. Bryce sat down hard on the edge of the mattress, jeans half-zipped. Oh no. Emma tilted her head, amused. Oh yes. Bryce buried his face in his hands. This is bad. Depends on your definition, Emma said lightly. Personally, I think it's hilarious. Bryce peeked through his fingers. Did we? He couldn't finish the sentence. His throat locked up. Emma's eyes sparkled with mischief. You really don't remember? Bryce groaned. That's a terrifying answer. She laughed, the sound warm and unhurried. Relax, Tiger. You passed out on my couch. Tyler and Jenna dragged you here because you were too drunk to drive. I put you in my bed because the couch is a war crime against comfort. Bryce stared at her, relief flooding his system so fast it made him dizzy. So, nothing happened? Emma shrugged. Unless you count snoring like a chainsaw. Bryce exhaled so hard he nearly deflated. Thank God. Emma grinned. Don't thank him yet. You still owe me breakfast. Bryce blinked. Breakfast? House rules, Emma said, swinging her legs out of bed. She wore an oversized t-shirt that hit mid-thigh, and Bryce immediately looked away, focusing on a very interesting crack in the wall. You crash here, you feed the host. I like pancakes. Bryce opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. I don't even know where I am. Downtown, Emma said cheerfully, patting toward the door. Kitchen's that way. I'll make coffee. You look like you need it. Bryce sat frozen for a full 30 seconds after she left. His mind a scrambled mess. Tyler's sister. Tyler's sister. He was in Tyler's sister's apartment wearing borrowed clothes and a hangover like a crown of thorns. If Tyler found out, Bryce would never hear the end of it. He'd probably get a commemorative plaque. Here lies Bryce Snider, slain by circumstance and bad tequila decisions. He dragged himself to his feet and followed the smell of coffee. The apartment was bright and airy, decorated with a mix of modern chic and personal touches. Photos of Emma with friends, a framed quote about courage, a potted plant thriving against all odds. Bryce felt like an intruder in a life that seemed far more put together than his own. Emma was at the counter pouring coffee into 2 mugs. She glanced up and smiled, and Bryce felt something shift. Something he didn't want to name yet. She was beautiful, sure, but not in the glossy magazine way. There was a spark in her eyes, a confidence that made the room feel smaller and bigger at the same time. Cream and sugar? She asked. Black's fine, Bryce said, because admitting he liked 3 sugars felt too intimate right now. She handed him a mug. So, Bryce Snider, the legendary nice guy. Bryce nearly choked on his coffee. What? Emma leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Tyler's been telling stories for years. How you helped him move 3 times without complaining. How you drove Jenna to the ER at 2 a.m. when she sprained her ankle. How you're basically the patron saint of good friends. Bryce flushed. He exaggerates. Does he? Emma's smile softened. You don't strike me as the type who does things for show. Bryce shrugged, uncomfortable under the weight of her gaze. I just Think if you care about people, you show up. No strings attached. Emma studied him for a moment, then nodded like she'd filed that away for later. That's rare. Bryce didn't know what to say to that, so he focused on his coffee. It was strong, rich, and blessedly grounding. He needed grounding, because his world had tilted overnight, and he wasn't sure which way was up. Emma pushed off the counter. Pancakes. Bryce blinked. You were serious about that? Deadly, Emma said, grabbing a mixing bowl. You're on whisk duty. Bryce hesitated, then took the whisk she offered. As he stirred, he felt the strangest thing. A flicker of ease, like maybe this wasn't a disaster after all. Maybe it was something else. Chapter 3. Enter the sister. Emma had always liked mornings. The quiet hum before the world started shouting. Today, though, her morning came with a side of entertainment. Bryce Snider, looking like he'd been hit by a truck made of regret and tequila. She sipped her coffee, watching him whisk pancake batter like it was a life-or-death mission. His shoulders were broad, his jaw tense, and his expression somewhere between concentration and existential crisis. Tyler hadn't exaggerated. Bryce radiated sincerity like most people radiated Wi-Fi signals. It was almost disarming. So, Emma said, leaning against the counter, is this your usual Saturday routine? Wake up in strange apartments and make breakfast? Bryce shot her a look, cheeks coloring. Not exactly. Good, Emma teased. I'd hate to think I'm just part of your weekend circuit. Bryce shook his head, muttering something about Tyler under his breath. Emma grinned. She'd heard plenty about Bryce over the years, how he was the guy you called when your car broke down at midnight, the guy who showed up with soup when you were sick, the guy who never asked for anything in return. Tyler had painted him as a unicorn in a world full of donkeys. Emma had been skeptical. People like that didn't exist. Not really. But then she'd walked into her apartment last night to find Bryce snoring on her couch. Tiara still perched on his head like a crown of accidental glory. And instead of annoyance, she'd felt curious. Tyler says you're too nice for your own good, Emma said, watching him pour batter onto the skillet. Bryce shrugged. I don't think being decent is a flaw. Emma tilted her head.
No.
But it makes you a target. Bryce glanced at her, brow furrowing. For what? For people who take advantage, Emma said simply. Trust is expensive these days. Bryce didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened, and Emma wondered if she'd hit a nerve. She hadn't meant to pry. Well, maybe a little. But she was genuinely intrigued. There was something about him. Something steady and unpretentious. Like a lighthouse in a storm. And Emma, fresh off a corporate implosion and a messy breakup, found herself drawn to that kind of calm. She decided to lighten the mood. So, tell me, Bryce Snider, why haven't you dated since high school? Tyler says you're single by choice. Bryce flipped a pancake with surgical precision. Tyler talks too much. Emma smiled. True. But he's not wrong, is he? Bryce hesitated, then sighed. I guess I got tired of feeling like a wallet with a pulse. Emma blinked. Wow, that's bleak. He gave a humorless laugh. It's true. I take someone out, pay for dinner, and then poof, they'd vanish. No call, no text. Just gone. Emma studied him, her chest tightening unexpectedly. She'd met men who treated women like accessories. But Bryce? He'd been the accessory. The thought made her oddly protective, and maybe a little angry on his behalf. Sounds like you were dating the wrong people, she said softly. Bryce shrugged again, like it didn't matter. But Emma could see the cracks. The way his shoulders slumped, the flicker of hurt he tried to hide. He wasn't bitter, not exactly, but he'd built walls. High ones. Emma filed that away. She wasn't here to tear down walls, not yet. But she was curious enough to peek over them. The pancakes turned out golden and perfect, because of course they did. Bryce seemed like the kind of guy who'd excel at anything domestic. Emma set the table while he plated the food, and for a moment it felt normal, comfortable, like they'd done this 100 times. Halfway through breakfast, Bryce's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and groaned. Tyler, Emma guessed. Tyler, Bryce confirmed, showing her the message. Where are you? Pancake King? Emma laughed so hard she nearly spilled her coffee. Pancake King? That's your new title. Bryce buried his face in his hands. I'm never living this down. Emma grinned, a spark of mischief lighting her eyes. Oh, you're definitely not. Chapter 4. The Walk of Shame and Blame. Bryce had never been more grateful for sunglasses. They were the only thing standing between him and the blinding judgment of the sun, and, more importantly, the judgment of his friends. He parked his car outside the beach house and sat there for a full minute, gripping the steering wheel like it was a lifeline. He could still hear Emma's voice in his head. House rules. You crash here, you feed the host. Pancakes had been eaten, coffee consumed, and Bryce had escaped with his dignity mostly intact. Mostly. Except for the fact that Tyler was about to find out where he'd spent the night. Bryce considered driving away, claiming food poisoning or alien abduction. But then his phone buzzed again. Dude, get in here. We need details. Followed by a gif of a tiger winking. Bryce groaned. He was never living this down. Inside, the beach house looked like a war zone after a glitter bomb. Empty cups littered the counters, someone's shoe dangled from the ceiling fan, and Tyler was sprawled on the couch like a king surveying his kingdom. Jenna sat cross-legged on the floor, scrolling through her phone with the serene expression of someone who knew all the gossip before it happened. "Look who finally decided to show up," Tyler said, grinning like a cat with cream. "Morning, Pancake King." Bryce yanked off his sunglasses and glared. "Don't start." "Oh, I'm already halfway through," Tyler said, sitting up. "So, Emma?" Bryce froze. "You knew?" Tyler's grin widened. "Of course I knew. I arranged it." Bryce stared. "You what?" Jenna looked up, smirking. "Don't kill him. It was a group effort." Bryce felt his blood pressure spike. "You dragged me to her apartment?" Tyler held up his hands. "Technically, Jenna drove. You were out cold, man. We couldn't leave you here." Bryce rubbed his temples. "You could have taken me home and missed this?" Tyler gestured dramatically. "Bryce Snider, waking up next to my sister? That's rom-com gold." Bryce groaned. "Nothing happened." "Sure," Tyler said, winking. "That's what they all say." Bryce dropped onto the armchair, wishing it would swallow him whole. "You're insane." "Insanely brilliant," Tyler corrected. "Emma's single. You're single. She's gorgeous. You're you." Bryce shot him a look. "Thanks for the pep talk." Jenna grinned. "He means you're a good guy. Emma needs that right now." Bryce frowned. "What do you mean?" Jenna hesitated, then shrugged. "She's been through a lot. Lost her job, moved back here, trying to figure things out. She could use someone steady." Bryce felt a pang of sympathy, and something else he didn't want to name. I don't want to be someone's rebound." Tyler rolled his eyes. "You're not a rebound. You're a freaking upgrade." Bryce stared at the floor, his thoughts a tangled mess. He'd spent years avoiding this exact situation, getting pulled into something messy, something complicated. And yet, when Emma had smiled at him over coffee, he'd felt something dangerous. Jenna's phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen. "Speak of the devil," she said, grinning. "Emma says thanks for breakfast." Bryce's stomach flipped. He didn't ask what else the text said. He didn't want to know. Tyler leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "So, when's date number 2? Bryce groaned again. "There's no date number 2. Tyler smirked. "Keep telling yourself that, Pancake King." Chapter 5? Coffee and Confessions? Bryce stared at his phone for a solid 5 minutes before typing a reply to Emma's text. "Glad you liked breakfast. Hope your day's good." It was safe, neutral. The kind of message that didn't scream "I'm spiraling because I can't stop thinking about you." Her response came almost instantly. "It's better now. Want to grab coffee later?" Bryce blinked. Coffee. With Emma, Tyler's sister, the woman who'd seen him at his absolute worst. Passed out, tiara askew, dignity in shreds. Every instinct told him to decline, to keep things simple. But then he remembered her laugh, warm and unguarded. And the way she'd said trust was expensive. Something in him wanted to prove it wasn't. Sure, he typed before he could overthink it. Where? The cafe was small and sunlit, with mismatched chairs and the smell of roasted beans curling through the air like a promise. Bryce arrived early, because of course he did, and picked a corner table where he could see the door. He told himself it wasn't nerves, just good manners. His pulse disagreed. Emma walked in 5 minutes later, and Bryce's brain short-circuited. She wasn't dressed up. Jeans, a soft sweater, hair pulled back. But she carried herself like someone who owned the room without trying. When she spotted him, her smile was quick and genuine, and Bryce felt something loosen in his chest. "Pancake King," she said by way of greeting, sliding into the chair across from him. Bryce groaned. "Please don't make that stick." Emma grinned. "Too late. It's iconic." He shook his head, fighting a smile. "You're relentless." "Occupational hazard," Emma said, waving at the barista. "I used to work in marketing. We ruin lives with catchphrases." Bryce chuckled, then sobered. "Tyler mentioned. You lost your job?" Emma's expression flickered, but she nodded. "Company went under. Bankruptcy. One day I was running campaigns. The next I was boxing up my desk." Bryce hesitated. "That sucks." Emma shrugged, though her voice was softer now. "It does. But maybe it's a sign. I've been running so hard for years. Chasing promotions. Chasing everything. And for what? A title that vanished overnight." Bryce studied her, the weight behind her words settling in his chest. He knew that feeling, building something only to watch it crumble. His version had been quieter, less dramatic, but no less real. "So what now?" Emma smiled faintly. "That's the million-dollar question. For now, I'm just figuring things out, trying not to drown in the noise." Bryce nodded slowly. "I get that." Emma tilted her head. "Do you?" Bryce hesitated, then decided honesty was easier than pretending. "I used to think dating was simple. You meet someone, you connect, you build something. But somewhere along the way, it turned into games, strategies. Swipe left, Swipe right. I got tired of feeling like a transaction. Emma's gaze softened. Tyler said you gave up. Bryce gave a humorless laugh. Pretty much. Emma leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. So why'd you say yes to coffee? Bryce opened his mouth, then closed it. He could lie. Say he was being polite. Say he owed her for breakfast. But the truth was sitting heavy in his chest, demanding air. Because you don't feel like noise. Emma blinked, and for a moment, the cafe seemed to hush around them. Then she smiled. Slow, warm, and a little dangerous. Careful, Bryce Snider. That almost sounded like flirting. Bryce flushed. Almost. Emma's grin widened. Almost. The barista arrived with their drinks, breaking the spell. Emma stirred her latte, still smiling, and Bryce wondered if he just stepped onto a path he couldn't turn back from. And if, for once, that wasn't a bad thing. Chapter 6. Friends stir the pot. Tyler was many things. Loyal, loud, occasionally reckless, but subtle had never made the list. Bryce realized this the moment he walked into the group chat later that night and saw the name change. Operation Pancake King. Bryce stared at his phone in horror. No, 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 no. The chat exploded with notifications. Tyler, Phase 2 begins now. Bryce plus Emma equals OTP. Jenna, he's gonna hate you for this. Tyler, worth it. Mark, do we get matching shirts? Bryce typed furiously. Delete this. Right now. Tyler replied with a gif of a tiger wearing sunglasses. Bryce considered throwing his phone into the ocean. Meanwhile, Emma was sitting on her couch, scrolling through the same chat with an amused smile. Tyler had added her without warning, and now she was watching her brother orchestrate what could only be described as a rom-com coup. Jenna, Emma, blink twice if you need rescuing. Emma snorted and typed. I'm fine. Bryce is interesting. The typing bubbles appeared instantly. Tyler, interesting equals good. Good equals progress. Emma rolled her eyes. You're insufferable. Tyler, you love me. Emma set her phone down, laughing softly. She wasn't sure what she felt yet. Not exactly. But Bryce had surprised her. He wasn't flashy or smooth, but there was something about his honesty, the way he listened like it mattered. After years of boardrooms and buzzwords, that felt rare. Bryce, on the other hand, was pacing his apartment like a man preparing for battle. He'd survived the coffee date without embarrassing himself, mostly, but now his friends were turning his life into a spectator sport. He could practically hear Tyler's voice. You're welcome, bro, Bryce muttered under his breath. I'm going to kill him. His phone buzzed again. A new message from Emma. Ignore them. They're having fun. Bryce stared at the screen, then smiled despite himself. You're not mad? He typed. Her reply came quick. Nope, but if they start printing shirts, I'm out. Bryce laughed, tension easing from his shoulders. Deal. Later that night, Tyler called. Bryce answered with a sigh. If this is about the chat. It's not, Tyler said, which was a lie Bryce could hear from space. Just checking in. How was coffee? Bryce hesitated. Fine. Fine? Tyler scoffed. That's all I get? Come on, man. Give me something. Bryce rubbed his forehead. She's great. There was a beat of silence. Then Tyler hooped so loud Bryce had to hold the phone away. I knew it. Pancake King and Emma. This is destiny. Bryce groaned. Goodbye, Tyler. He hung up before Tyler could start planning their wedding. Chapter 7. The Gentleman's Dilemma. Bryce had always thought of himself as steady. A man who knew where his feet were planted. But tonight, as he stood outside Emma's apartment building, he felt anything but. His pulse was a drumbeat in his ears. His palms slick against the bouquet he'd bought on impulse. He wasn't even sure why he'd come. Maybe because avoiding her had started to feel like lying, and Bryce hated lies. He rang the bell. A moment later, Emma opened the door, barefoot and wearing a loose sweatshirt that looked like it had seen better days. Her hair was piled on top of her head in a messy knot, and somehow she still managed to look like trouble wrapped in comfort. Bryce, she said, eyebrows lifting. This is unexpected. Yeah, Bryce admitted, holding out the flowers like a peace offering. I thought you might like these. Emma took them, her smile slow and curious. You're full of surprises. Bryce stepped inside, nerves jangling. The apartment smelled faintly of vanilla and coffee, and the soft hum of music drifted from a speaker in the corner. He tried not to notice the way Emma's sweatshirt slipped off one shoulder, revealing smooth skin and a collarbone that made his thoughts scatter like marbles. So, Emma said, setting the flowers in a vase. What brings you here? Tyler didn't send you, did he? Bryce grimaced. God, no. If Tyler knew, he'd livestream this. Emma laughed, and Bryce felt the tension in his chest ease. Just a little. Then what? Bryce hesitated, searching for words that didn't sound like a confession or a disaster. I guess, I wanted to see you, without the noise. Emma tilted her head, studying him like he was a puzzle she wasn't sure she wanted to solve. You're a hard man to read, Bryce Snider. Bryce gave a humorless laugh. That's funny. I feel like I'm an open book. Maybe, Emma said softly. But some pages stick together. The silence stretched, charged and fragile. Bryce wanted to tell her everything. That he liked her laugh, that she made him feel like the world wasn't as loud as it used to be. But the words tangled in his throat, and instead he said, "You deserve honesty." Emma's brows lifted. About what? Bryce swallowed hard. About me. I'm not casual. I don't do flings. If I'm here, it's because I want something real. Emma blinked, and for a moment, Bryce thought he'd gone too far. Then her lips curved into a smile that was equal parts amused and something warmer. You really are a gentleman. Bryce shrugged, heat creeping up his neck. I don't know how to be anything else. Emma stepped closer, her gaze steady. That's not a flaw, Bryce. It's rare. Bryce's breath caught. She was close enough now that he could smell her shampoo, something clean and faintly floral. His heart thudded like it was trying to escape his chest. He wanted to kiss her. God, he wanted to. But he hesitated because hesitation was his default setting. Because what if this was a mistake? What if she didn't want? Emma reached up and brushed a stray hair from his forehead, her fingers lingering just long enough to make his pulse spike. You think too much, she murmured. Bryce managed a shaky laugh. Occupational hazard. Emma smiled, and for a heartbeat, Bryce thought this was it, the moment everything changed. He leaned in, just enough to feel the warmth of her breath. And the front door banged open. Emma! Tyler's voice boomed like a wrecking ball. You will not believe what— Oh. Bryce jerked back so fast he nearly tripped over the coffee table. Tyler froze in the doorway, eyes flicking from Bryce to Emma and back again, a grin spreading like wildfire. Well, Tyler said, smirking, this is interesting. Bryce closed his eyes and prayed for spontaneous combustion. Chapter 8. Disaster date. Bryce had agreed to the date against his better judgment, or maybe because his better judgment had taken a vacation. Tyler had practically shoved him into it. Jenna had sent him a list of conversation starters like he was 12, and Emma had smiled and said, why not? And Bryce had never been good at saying no to a smile like that. He'd planned everything. Nice restaurant, quiet corner table, flowers in the car. He even ironed his shirt, which was a big deal for a man whose idea of formal wear was clean jeans. This was going to be perfect. It wasn't. The first sign of doom came when Bryce's car refused to start. He turned the key, and the engine coughed like a smoker on its last pack. Bryce tried again. Nothing. He sat there, gripping the steering wheel, whispering prayers to the automotive gods. They ignored him. By the time he called a rideshare, he was already late. When he finally arrived at the restaurant, Emma was waiting by the entrance, looking effortlessly stunning in a simple black dress. Bryce's heart did a somersault, and then tripped over its own feet. You're late, Emma said, arching an eyebrow. Bryce winced. Car trouble. I swear I'm not usually this unreliable. Emma smiled faintly. Good thing I like a little chaos. Bryce relaxed, until the hostess led them to their table and Bryce realized it was not the quiet corner he'd requested. It was smack in the middle of the dining room, next to a birthday party complete with balloons, confetti, and a man in a gorilla suit singing Happy Birthday at full volume. Emma bit her lip, clearly fighting laughter. Romantic, Bryce groaned. I swear this wasn't the plan. They sat down, and Bryce tried to salvage the evening. He ordered wine. The waiter brought it, and promptly spilled half the glass down Bryce's sleeve. Bryce jumped back, muttering apologies, while Emma laughed so hard she nearly cried. Okay, Bryce said, blotting his arm with a napkin. This is officially cursed. Emma grinned. Or memorable. Bryce smiled despite himself. That's one word for it. The disasters kept coming. The kitchen lost their order. The couple at the next table started a loud argument about cryptocurrency. Bryce's phone buzzed with a group text from Tyler and Jenna. How's the date? Don't screw it up, Pancake King. Bryce shoved the phone back in his pocket, praying Emma hadn't seen the screen. She had. Her smirk said everything. By the time dessert arrived, an hour late and missing the whipped cream, Bryce was ready to declare defeat. But then Emma leaned across the table, eyes sparkling, and said, You know what? This is the best date I've had in months. Bryce blinked. Seriously? Emma nodded. It's real, imperfect, and you didn't run when things went sideways. Bryce stared at her, something warm unfurling in his chest. I wanted to. Emma laughed, and the sound was like sunlight breaking through clouds. But you didn't. That counts. Bryce smiled, and for the first time all night he felt like maybe, just maybe, the universe wasn't against him. Maybe it was just testing him, and maybe he was passing. Chapter 9. Secrets and setups. Bryce had been riding the fragile high of their disaster date for 2 days. Emma had laughed, really laughed, and even texted him later. Next time, no gorilla suits. Bryce had stared at that message for an hour, grinning like an idiot. For the first time in years, he felt like something good might actually stick. Then he walked into Tyler's apartment and the whole illusion cracked. Tyler, Jenna, and 2 other friends were huddled around the kitchen island like conspirators in a bad spy movie. Bryce froze in the doorway, catching the tail end of Jenna's sentence. And if we can get them to the cabin next weekend, that'll seal the deal. Bryce's stomach dropped. Seal what deal? For heads whipped around. Tyler's grin was instant and infuriating. Bryce, just the man we were talking about. Bryce stepped closer, suspicion sharpening his voice. What's going on? Jenna tried for innocent. Nothing. Just plans. Bryce's gaze landed on the whiteboard behind them, covered in bullet points. Emma plus Bryce equals endgame. Underneath, someone had drawn a heart and a pancake. Bryce felt heat crawl up his neck. You've got to be kidding me. Tyler raised his hands. Okay. Before you freak out. Too late, Bryce snapped. You've been planning this? Since when? Tyler shrugged. Since the party. Maybe before. Bryce stared, anger and humiliation tangling in his chest. So what? Emma was in on it? Jenna shook her head quickly. No, she wasn't. We just nudged things. Bryce laughed, sharp and humorless. Nudged? You dragged me to her apartment like a sack of potatoes. Tyler winced. Look, man, we were trying to help. You've been single forever. Emma's amazing. You're amazing. It made sense. Bryce's hands curled into fists at his sides. You don't get to make that decision for me. The room went quiet. Bryce's pulse roared in his ears. He hated how raw he sounded, but the truth was clawing its way out. He'd trusted them, and now he felt like a punchline. He turned on his heel, ignoring Tyler's voice calling after him. He needed air, space, anything but this. Emma was at her apartment when Bryce showed up, still simmering. She opened the door, smiling, until she saw his face. Bryce? What's wrong? He didn't waste time. Did you know? Emma blinked. Know what? That Tyler and Jenna have been playing matchmaker like it's their full-time job. Emma's brows shot up. Wait, what? Bryce searched her face, desperate for a flicker of guilt. He didn't find it. You didn't. Emma shook her head slowly. No. I knew they wanted us to meet. But a whiteboard? Seriously. Bryce exhaled, some of the tension bleeding out, but not all. I feel like an idiot. Emma stepped closer, her voice calm but firm. You're not an idiot. You're a good man who has meddling friends. Bryce gave a bitter laugh. That's supposed to make me feel better? Emma's gaze softened. No. But maybe this will. She reached out, her fingers brushing his arm, grounding him. I didn't say yes to coffee because of them, Bryce. I said yes because of you. Bryce's breath caught. For a moment, the anger wavered, replaced by something far more dangerous. Hope. But it was tangled in doubt, and Bryce wasn't sure which would win. Chapter 10. The big fallout. Bryce had never been good at anger. It sat awkwardly on him like a suit 2 sizes too small. But tonight, it fit, tight, suffocating, and impossible to ignore. He paced Emma's living room, words tumbling out before he could stop them. You didn't tell me. You didn't warn me. Emma stood near the window, arms crossed, her expression calm but her eyes sharp. Warn you about what? That my brother is a meddling idiot? Bryce, I didn't know about the whiteboard until you told me. Bryce stopped pacing, frustration clawing at his chest. It's not just the whiteboard. It's the whole setup. The party, dragging me to your apartment, pushing us together like we're pieces on a chessboard. Emma's voice softened, but her tone stayed firm. And that makes what we have fake? Bryce flinched. I don't know. Maybe. Emma's jaw tightened. Wow. So because Tyler had a plan, everything between us is a lie. Bryce raked a hand through his hair, his thoughts a storm. I've been burned before, Emma. I don't want to be someone's project. Emma's eyes flashed. Project? Is that what you think I see you as? Bryce hesitated, guilt and fear tangling in his throat. I don't know what to think. Emma stepped closer, her voice low and steady. Then let me make it simple. I wanted coffee with you because I wanted you, not Tyler's plan, not Jenna's matchmaking. You. Bryce met her gaze, and for a moment, hope flickered. But doubt crushed it just as fast. How can I trust that? Emma stared at him, something breaking in her expression. Maybe you can't. Maybe you're so busy waiting for the world to hurt you that you can't see when it's trying to give you something good. The words hit like a punch. Bryce opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Emma shook her head, grabbed her coat, and moved toward the door. Emma, Bryce started, but she cut him off with a look that silenced him. I'm done proving myself, Bryce. Figure out what you want. And when you do, maybe it won't be too late. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded louder than any slam. Bryce stood there, staring at the empty space where she'd been, his chest hollow and his hands useless at his sides. For the first time in years, Bryce felt truly lost. Not because he didn't know what he wanted, but because he did. And he just watched it walk away. Chapter 11. Heart to heart, Bryce hadn't slept. He'd spent the night staring at the ceiling, replaying Emma's words until they carved grooves in his mind. Maybe you're so busy waiting for the world to hurt you that you can't see when it's trying to give you something good. By morning, the weight of it was unbearable. He needed answers, Or maybe just someone to tell him he wasn't the complete idiot he felt like. So he drove to Tyler's apartment, rehearsing speeches in his head and discarding them just as fast. Tyler opened the door in sweatpants and a grin that vanished when he saw Bryce's face. "Oh, you look like you wrestled a bear and lost." Bryce pushed past him. "We need to talk." Tyler closed the door slowly. "Okay, should I call Jenna for backup?" Bryce turned, anger simmering under exhaustion. "Why did you do it?" Tyler blinked. "Do what?" "The setup. The party. Dragging me to Emma's apartment like I was a prop in your rom-com fantasy." Tyler sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Because you've been miserable, man. You gave up on dating like it was a bad habit. And Emma, she's not just my sister. She's Emma. Smart, funny, way out of your league." "Not helping," Bryce muttered. Tyler held up his hands. "Look, we didn't mean to make you feel like a joke. We just wanted you to have a shot at something real." Bryce laughed bitterly. "Real? You think real starts with manipulation?" Tyler's expression softened.
No.
"But it doesn't end there either. You think Emma stuck around because of us? She could have walked away after that first morning. She didn't." Bryce froze. The truth in Tyler's words hit like a gut punch. Emma had stayed. She'd laughed with him, shared pieces of herself she didn't owe him. That wasn't Tyler's doing. That was hers. Tyler stepped closer, voice low and steady. "You're a good guy, Bryce, but you've been so scared of getting hurt that you're hurting yourself. Emma's not a setup anymore. She's a choice. Yours." Bryce swallowed hard, the fight draining out of him. "What if I already blew it?" Tyler shrugged. "Then fix it. You're Bryce Snider, the guy who shows up when people need him. So show up." Bryce stared at the floor, Tyler's words echoing in his head. Show up sounded simple. It wasn't. But maybe it was the only thing that mattered. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Tyler called. Bryce didn't look back. To figure out if it's too late. Chapter 12, The Grand Gesture. Bryce had never been the grand gesture type. He wasn't the guy who showed up with boomboxes or flash mobs. But as he stood outside Emma's apartment building with a bouquet of sunflowers in one hand and a paper bag of her favorite pastries in the other, he realized this was as grand as he got. And it had to be enough. He rang the bell. No answer. He rang again, pulse thudding like a drumline. Still nothing. Panic clawed at his chest. What if she wasn't home? What if she was done, really done? Bryce turned to leave, rehearsing apologies for later, when the elevator dinged. Emma stepped out, hair wind-tossed, grocery bag in her arms. She froze when she saw him. "Bryce," she said slowly, like his name was a question. He swallowed hard. "Hey!" Emma's gaze flicked to the flowers, then the pastries. "What's all this?" Bryce took a breath, the kind that felt like diving into deep water. "It's me showing up." Emma blinked, and Bryce rushed on before courage abandoned him. "I was wrong," he said, voice rough. "About everything. About thinking this was a setup, about doubting you. I let my fear talk louder than the truth. And the truth is, I want you. Not because Tyler pushed us together, not because my friends think it's cute. Because when I'm with you, the world feels quiet. And I haven't had quiet in a long time." Emma stared at him, her expression unreadable. Bryce's heart hammered. He'd laid himself bare, and now all he could do was wait. Finally, Emma set her grocery bag down and stepped closer. "You really are a gentleman," she murmured. Bryce managed a shaky smile. "Trying to be." Emma's lips curved, soft and warm. "You didn't have to bring flowers." "I wanted to," Bryce said. "And pastries, because pancakes felt too on the nose." Emma laughed. A sound Bryce wanted to bottle and keep forever. "You're ridiculous." "Probably," Bryce admitted. "But I'm yours if you'll have me." Emma's smile faltered, then bloomed into something that stole Bryce's breath. She reached up, fingers brushing his jaw, and whispered, "Took you long enough." Bryce didn't think. He just moved, closing the space between them, kissing her like he'd been holding his breath for years. Emma kissed him back, sure and steady, and for the first time in forever, Bryce felt like he'd found the thing he thought didn't exist anymore. Something worth having. Something real. Chapter 13. Epilogue: A Gentleman's Win. The beach house looked different this time. Same string lights, same ocean breeze, but everything felt lighter. Bryce stood on the deck, arm draped casually around Emma's shoulders, watching the sun sink into the horizon like it had nowhere else to be. His friends were scattered across the patio, laughing, clinking glasses, and pretending not to stare at the couple who had become the group's favorite success story. Tyler sauntered over, grinning like a man who just won a bet. Well, look at you, Snider. Domestic bliss suits you." Bryce smirked. "Don't start." "Oh, I'm starting," Tyler said, raising his beer. "To the Pancake King and his queen." Emma laughed, leaning into Bryce. "You're never living that down." Bryce groaned. "I've accepted my fate." Jenna appeared with her phone, snapping a photo before Bryce could protest. "For the wedding slideshow," she said innocently. Bryce choked. "Wedding?" Emma's eyes sparkled with mischief. Relax, Tiger. One step at a time. Bryce grinned, the nickname hitting him like a warm echo of that chaotic morning. He'd hated it then. He loved it now. As the group drifted back to their games and chatter, Bryce looked at Emma. Really looked at her. The woman who turned his quiet resignation into something loud and alive. He thought about the path that had led here. The party, the pancakes, the fights, the fear. And he realized something simple and profound. He hadn't lost himself by trusting again. He'd found himself. Emma squeezed his hand, reading the thought on his face like it was printed in bold. You okay? Bryce smiled, slow and certain. Better than okay. The music swelled, laughter rolled across the deck, and Bryce kissed her. Soft, sure, and full of promise. Around them, the world kept spinning, loud and messy and imperfect. But for Bryce Snider, it had never felt quieter, or better.